let's get started now with sowing seeds indoors. Sowing seeds indoors are one of the simplest and cheapest ways to have a wide variety of plants for your garden. And joining us to tell us how to start our own plants indoors is Maureen Heffernan from Cleveland Botanical Garden. Maureen, thanks for being with us today.
Hi, it's great to be here.
So why should we bother starting our own plants indoors when you could just go to the garden center and buy plants?
Well, there's three main reasons. One is it's so much less expensive than buying plants. The second reason is, which is probably my favorite, is it's just a real thrill to start your own seedlings. You know, to give life to these little seedlings is just a real thrill. And third reason is you have access to so many more interesting kinds of plants. It'd be like going to a grocery store and there's just one kind of soup to buy. With starting seeds, you can have access to new hybrids, heirlooms, just a whole range of really interesting kinds of plants.
And you order the seeds from catalogs? I mean, is that the way to get the wide variety?
Probably to get the most interesting things, the newest things, are catalogs. And there are so many interesting, fascinating catalogs out there.
And I don't know if you can see us now through all of this foliage, but we're going to talk now, obviously, about houseplants. Houseplants are a great way to bring the outdoors indoors.
It definitely is, and joining us from the Botanical Garden is Cynthia Mazer.
Hi there.
Hey Cynthia, I see a lovely ficus tree over here.
Yeah, we brought several houseplants here today to show everybody what some of the more common houseplants are. And what I have here is a variegated ficus tree, and the reason why it's called variegated is, do you see the outer edges of the leaves here, how they're lighter in color?
Two-tone.
Such as that. Yeah, many ficus trees come in lots of different varieties now, and this is one of them, but a lot of the ficus trees are also have leaves which are uniformly green. So they're a popular houseplant, and they come in small shrub sizes up like this, up to trees which can get 6 feet or taller.
Are they hard to grow?
No, actually they're really easy to grow. You would put them in your house in a relatively sunny location, but not bright direct sunlight. They require moderate watering levels and pruning. Pruning is the most important.
Hand and power tools, while being a lot of fun to use, are also great ways to save time and energy in the garden.
Well, that's right. And joining us now to tell us how you should really use them is lead horticulturist from Cleveland Botanical Garden, Paul Pfeiffer. Thanks for being here, Paul.
Now, Paul, I know safety comes first, so why don't you show us some of these safety things we need to use?
No matter how much fun you have with garden tools or how much work you need to get done with garden tools, it's always remember to be very safe and very practical using them. Keep the first aid kit nearby, especially if you're using power tools. I would highly recommend using some kind of work gloves. Now, a lot of people don't like to use work gloves. They feel like they're somewhat cumbersome and hard to really get your hands in the soil. But these mud gloves are great. They're actually canvas gloves. They're dipped in rubber, and they have good grip. They don't get wet when you're dealing with water and soil. You can really feel the materials that you're working with. It's very easy to use these gloves. And you want to make sure that you keep all your equipment nice and clean and sharp. Now, there's a few other things we have here. These knee pads are, as most gardeners spend a lot of time on the ground. So if you can use knee pads of some sort, whether it's just a simple styrofoam pad or these actual knee pads that you strap on, these work really well. They'll save your knees, keep your pants clean so the launderer in the family won't get too excited.
Wow. Well, Jeremy and I are with Angelo Petiti now inside the greenhouse. And Angelo, you're going to tell us about some new varieties of annuals and perennials available to Northeastern Ohio gardeners this year. What do you have?
Well, in the last few years, many new varieties have really improved drastically. So I'll point out a few as much time as we can put in. The first one over here, this is a new hosta. It's called September Sun. It does exceptionally well in shade. It needs about 2 hours of sunlight, and as the plant matures, it gets better and better and better. Right behind it, we have a new daisy. This one is called Becky. As you can see, it's a lot of buds, a lot of flowers. It starts blooming about the end of May, and it just does not stop all year long. Great for cutting. Bring a bouquet in. The more you cut, the more it's going to keep right on going.
Well, Angelo Petiti just showed us some of those new annuals and perennials that you'll find this year, but what do you do once you get your plants home?
Well, join us is my friend Michael Lose here, who's curator of collections at the Botanical Gardens. Michael, you have all these plants. What are you going to do to prepare your bed for them?
Well, the best thing you can do is spend a lot of money on soil amendment. You want to put in compost or leaf humus, maybe some sand, and really mix that into the top foot to foot and a half of soil. If you don't do that, you end up with a kind of a slow perennial or annual bed, and things just don't grow very quickly and they don't fill out like they should.
Any different preparation for a perennial versus for an annual?
Well, you might want to fertilize a little bit heavier once things are in the ground for your perennials, but for the most part, as long as you do an excellent soil amendment, everything is going to grow very, very well for you.
Well, just a few minutes ago, Michael Lose told us how important it is to prepare your beds for your flowers, your annuals and perennials, and it's just as important for your vegetables.
And join us is my friend Larry Giblock from the Botanical Garden. And I guess something we're going to highlight is the most important thing you can do for your garden is to increase the quality of your soil. And so Larry's going to touch on a couple of the things here that you can add to your garden to really build up the quality of your soil.
So we're going to talk about mulches, fertilizers, and composting, basically?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
well, let's start.
Okay, the first thing you want to do before you even start looking at any fertilizers or mulches is to have your soil tested and analyzed. It's just like going to a doctor and not really knowing what's wrong with you and just start taking pills indiscriminately. It would not be very healthy.
And joining us again is Michael Lose from Cleveland Botanical Garden. Cleveland Botanical Garden is helping to produce this program today, 4 hours of these helpful gardening tips. And Michael Lose, you're going to tell us now about container gardening. Now, Jeremy, how do we start?
I mean, this almost looks like terracotta, because where in Northeast Ohio, where we are, zone 5 or 6, this might break over the winter time, but this looks light enough that even you could pick it up, Julie.
Yeah, tell us about some of these containers, Michael.
These containers are great. These are new on the market. This one in particular is a polymer resin fiberglass container. It's perfectly sturdy to exist in our hard climate. It's not going to crack, it's not going to wear, you're not going to get ground corners, you won't have chips coming out of it, and you can leave it out all winter with soil in it.
And it's incredible. It looks exactly like terracotta that has been aged a little bit. But you couldn't leave,
that's right.
If this were terracotta, you couldn't leave this outside all winter.
No, it wouldn't last in our winters. Even like little watermarks, they've been able to put watermarks in this polymer, and it's really a great alternative to terracotta.
In fact, all the containers I think we're going to see right now are all ones that will work here in Northeast Ohio with our winters.
That's right. Every container we're showing is completely hardy for our climate.
Well, for most of us, there's nothing more satisfying as a gardener than growing your own vegetables, bringing them in the house, and then enjoying them. And right now, Angelo Petiti from Petiti Garden Centers is back with us to tell us how to plan and to plant our own vegetable gardens, right?
Yes, I think planning of the garden is one of the most important things, especially if you never had one. You should really take the time to plan the space where you're going to put it in, how big. First of all, don't start with too big, because sometimes by starting with too big of a too big of a garden, it's going to be way too much work. So you're much better off think small, and then work from there. If you never had a garden, the first thing that I would do is make sure that you pick out a nice sunny location. You need at least 6 to 7 hours of sunlight. You don't want to plant a garden in a wet area. It needs to be in a dry area, someplace that it drains well. If you have any problems if you definitely want to put it in a certain spot and there's too much moisture there, you should raise your bed at least 8 to 10 inches. These are some of the key requirements as far as placing a garden.
Bill Hoffman from Pond Supplies of Ohio is here to show us what you can do in the space you have to create a beautiful water garden. Thanks for being with us, Bill.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So Bill, how are we going to get started here?
Really depends on the size, the space that you have available. You can do a water gardening in an area 2 foot by 2 foot. You can do an area 50 by 50 feet or as large as you want. There's really no restrictions there. You can do a lot of water gardening in a small area or do a large area.
Well, what are the basic components that you need in your water garden?
Well, once you determine where you want to do your water gardening, you need a pump. We have the pump in this filtering system here. This is a mechanical filter, so any large pieces of leaves, seed pods, things are pulled into there and filtered out with a filter mat. And then we have pump, hose, and some type of a filtering system, a mechanical. We have also a biological filter here. This is where bacteria can grow that naturally occurring in lakes and streams will filter out the fish waste and convert that ammonia, which fish waste is primarily.
Well, Jeremy and I are back in the greenhouse, and right now we're going to talk about plant propagation and forcing. And plant propagation is what, Jeremy?
It's an easy way to grow plants from one that you already have.
And then forcing is a way to get your bulbs to bloom indoors, is that it?
Exactly. It's almost like growing plants on your schedule, not on Mother Nature's.
Okay, and joining us again is Angelo Petiti, who's going to show us some simple techniques that you can do at home. And Angelo, where do we start?
Well, in the propagating plant, probably the easiest and most commonly propagated plant are geraniums. So we'll start from that and then we'll do some New Guineas.
Okay. Well, Monty Clayton from Petiti Garden Centers joins us now to explain the do's and don'ts of pruning. Now, some folks think that the best time to prune is when you have a pair of pruning shears in your hand.
But Monty here is going to give us the edge on pruning.
I'm going to try.
So what's the basic? What's the first thing we need to know?
Well, first of all, the tree we're going to focus on today are the deciduous trees, meaning the trees lose their leaves in the winter. And here's an example. Here's the biggest mistake that people make, not cutting off at the branch collar. And I made a little red line there.
That's where you should be cutting off.
Correct. And what happens is a chemical process that occurs that keeps a decay from setting in. And here's an example of decay over here.
Well, the color and the interest that comes from your garden doesn't just have to come from the plants, it can also come from birds and from butterflies.
And here from the Botanical Garden is Cynthia Mazur, our insect expert there, who's going to talk about some different ways to attract butterflies and birds to our gardens.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well, what I have here is a selection of different butterfly plants. It's sort of difficult to find blooming material this time of year, but we do have a few specimens here, both annuals and perennials. I'll start with a few annuals. In the very front, we have 3 different varieties of pentis, otherwise known as Egyptian starflower. They come in white, reds, and pinks. Red is usually the best variety for attracting butterflies, but all of them will do a fairly good job of doing that. Remember that, again, that these are annuals and you will have to purchase them every year, but they are one of the best butterfly attracting plants around.
You know, for great chefs, there's nothing better than going out in the backyard and cutting fresh herbs to bring in and to use in recipes. And so now Maureen Heffernan joins us again from Cleveland Botanical Garden to tell us how we can grow and store our own herbs.
Right, well, herbs are great. If I could only grow one kind of plant in my garden, it would be herbs because they're beautiful and they're great for cooking. So you can't beat herbs, and they're very easy to grow also.
So what do you have here for us?
Well, I've got a couple of annual herbs, and this is probably America's favorite herb, basil. And we'll talk a little bit later about this is not how your basil should look, but this is the do not basil example. And we've got some parsley. So a lot of people grow these 2 annual herbs, parsley and basil. So what I'm going to do here is I just have some potting mix with a little bit of perlite mixed into it, which loosens it up and gives it some better drainage. And if I was planting anything else, I'd probably leave that alone. But with herbs, they like that really good drainage. I've just added this gravel into it.